Jurors and alternates are present. Mr. Durst is present with his lawyers, Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chesnoff. We have Mr. Miata, Mr. Milius, Mr. Bailey, and Mr. Lewin. Mr. Lewin, you may resume your cross-examination.
Mr. Durst, what time did you and Kathy, what time did Kathy arrive back at South Salem?
7:30.
And when the two of you, when she got home, did the two...
Microphone.
Oh,
I thought we turned it on, but maybe the battery went out again.
no, we're good.
Did you test it? Tap it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Durst, what, when the two of you got home, when Kathy got home, did the two of you argue?
No.
During your first two statements to Detective Struck on February 5th, 1982 and February 8th, 1992, you never mentioned that the two of you had argued. Is that correct? Is that correct?
I don't remember arguing with Kathy.
Do you remember, Mr. Durst, if you told... Getting a weird echo. Is that just...
There's a little echo.
Feedback.
Oh, okay.
Go.
I don't know what we can do
I
about
think
it.
if Mr. Durst angles the microphone towards, away from the speaker a little bit, it will help.
Okay, we'll have Mr. Lewin adjust that.
Like this?
No, the other way. Try that.
Okay.
Mr. Durst, what I was asking you is if you remember whether or not you told Detective Struck that you had argued with Kathy or that you had not argued with Kathy.
I don't remember arguing with Kathy.
Do you remember
I
what...
don't remember telling Detective Stroke that I did argue with Kathy.
On December 12, 2010, did you tell Andrew Jarecki that in fact you and Kathy had a violent argument?
I told him we struggled over her coat.
RD 077 12 page 442, line 12 to page 443, line 21.
And Your Honor, this is Peoples 269, the transcript for the exhibit, pages 61 through 62.
Before you play that, Mr. Durst, when Kathy got home, was she angry at all with you?
She was upset that the car needed diesel fuel. I don't know if she was angry with me.
Did she mention to you being upset or angry with you about anything relating to your personal life or your marriage? And I'm not talking about gas in the car.
No.
All right, please play RD 077.
So the night that you disappeared, that Sunday. So the night that you disappeared, that Sunday night, or the last night that you saw her, I think, do you want to just take me through what you remember happening that night?
She gets back from Blueberries, maybe 7 or whatever, angry at me, loaded, walks around the house, doing stuff, and announcing that she wants to go to the city. I said, you can go to the city if you want, but you can't drive, and I'm not going to go to the city. And
She couldn't drive because of her condition, or she was...
You can drive anytime. Her condition didn't bother me at all. We only had one car. We just had the Mercedes up there. So I wasn't gonna go back Sunday night. So the car and me and the dog were staying in South Salem. You can't take the dog to the kennel Sunday night anyway, until Monday when I take the dog to the kennel and go into the city. So if she wants to go to the city, she can take the train. And she says, no, I'm taking the car. And I went and got the keys out of the car and told her that she's not taking the car because I'm not giving her the keys. And if I wasn't not giving her the keys because she was loaded, I mean, she'd driven back from Gilberti's house just as loaded, no problem, but this was her thing. She wants to go to the city, I'll take her to the train station. She wants to go to the city, she can call a cab, but she's not taking the car. That was an argument.
Was that argument just a verbal argument?
No, that was a pushing, shoving argument.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that that statement is contradictory to the testimony you just gave?
I don't know if I would have. No.
I just asked you if you had any argument with your wife. You said no. I asked you if there was any kind of violent argument previous, and you've said no. Now you just said that you were asked, was that an argument just a verbal argument? You said no, that was a pushing, shoving argument. Would you agree that is completely inconsistent with the testimony you just gave 2 minutes ago?
No.
Mr. Durst, you realize that a moment ago you said there was no argument, correct?
Correct.
And you just said in this clip, not only was there an argument, but you corrected Mr. Jarecki when he said just a verbal argument. You said no, that was a pushing, shoving argument. Can you tell me how can those two statements you've given, one today and one to Mr. Jarecki in 2010, how are they not completely inconsistent?
Because what I said today is what I remember, and what I said to Andrew Jarecki was with his encouragement.
Okay, so you're not saying that the statements aren't consistent. You're admitting that the statements are inconsistent. You're merely saying that when I said the original statement to Andy Jarecki in 2010, I was lying because he told me to say that. Is that your testimony?
Correct.
Now, you understand the very next day, Mr. Durst, on December 13, 2010, you were asked again, and you gave a completely different answer than you had the day before. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that.
RD 078, 12-13-10, page 621, line 15, to page 622, line 7.
And Your Honor, this is People's 269. The transcript would be page 86.
Yeah. We didn't have a fight, we didn't wrestle, we didn't touch with her.
The night that
She disappeared.
because the other day
We
you
were on the train.
Yeah. But you did tell me in our last conversation that you did have a physical altercation that night.
I don't think I had a physical altercation that night. You're sure I told you that? 'Cause she came home, she was yelling and screaming. I don't remember pushing. I do remember going into the bedroom and locking the door and taking a pill. I don't remember any pushing and shoving.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that one day apart, you could not remember what your story was to keep it straight during your interview with Mr. Jarecki?
Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mr. DeGuerin wants to speak to you.
Oh. With the court's permission, think Mr. DeGuerin wants to inquire something of Mr. Durst. I don't have an objection.
Yeah.
He wanted me to ask, but I'd rather him do it.
Yeah, you on the record, or you want to speak with it privately?
No, I can do it here. Mr. Durst, you're not looking at the screen when they play these clips. And my question to you is, can you hear the audio?
He can't hear you. You gotta walk up to him, Dick.
Well, I know.
It's being typed.
She's typing it.
Well, let's do it, go.
You're not watching the screen when they play these clips. Can you hear what the audio
I'm
is?
relying on the tablet.
Not on the video.
No, I can't really hear what's on the screen.
That's my question.
Just to clarify, Your Honor, or maybe we can inquire, I believe the court reporter is transcribing the clips for him.
Yes, she is. She's transcribing the clips. He's just indicated that, and that's how he's able to answer the questions.
Okay.
He's not, obviously not reading his lips from the visual. The video is just him speaking. So it's more useful to him to look at his part or report on his screen. Makes sense to me.
May I continue, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Durst, so what I'm asking you is you just heard a clip of you saying that you had a pushing, shoving argument. You also just testified not only was there not a pushing, shoving argument, there was no argument at all. Aren't those two statements completely inconsistent and opposite of each other?
Are you talking about the two different statements I made to Andrew?
Yes. Yes, I apologize. You know what, with the...
They're different.
Yeah, no, with the interruption, that was a bad question. I forgot where I was. Let me get it right. Thank you for correcting me on that. What I was asking about was, correct, you've just given two statements to Andrew Jarecki, one on December 12th, which says you had a pushing, shoving argument. Then the next day you say, we didn't have a fight, we didn't wrestle, we didn't touch one another. And when Jarecki tells you, wait, but in our last conversation, didn't you say it was a physical altercation? And you said, no, I don't think I had a physical altercation that night. You're sure I told you that? You've just heard the two statements. Do you agree those two statements, both from you, one day apart, to Andrew Jarecki, are completely inconsistent with each other?
I told Andrew what I felt like telling Andrew.
Well, but I thought you told me that Andrew told you the first day to say that there was some kind of fight, and then you say that, and then the second day you were saying Andrew decides to tell you to say the opposite and then to try to correct you? Is that your statement?
By the time the interview had gotten to the third day, I was beginning to think that maybe I'd made a mistake and I was not going along with all of Andrew's directions.
So, Mr. Durst, when you said, I don't think I told you yesterday that we had a pushing, shoving argument, when you said that on the third day, you knew that was a lie, correct? Because you knew you had said that to him the day before. Is that right?
I lied to Andrew repeatedly.
Which version, were you lying on the 12th or the 13th or both?
Both.
How are we supposed to figure out when you're lying and when you're telling the truth?
I don't know.
If you think of it, let me know. Interrupt me. All right. Isn't it true that during your testimony with Mr. DeGuerin, you came up with a completely new version talking about a mutual pulling of Kathy's coat? Correct?
Correct.
And you'll agree that's a story you had never told before, prior to your
that's
testimony?
a story I've told repeatedly.
Who'd you tell it to? Not going to be Mr. Scapetta again, is it?
I think I told that story to Mike Strzok, as well as to Nick Scapetta and to Ed Wright.
Okay, well, we've got a live person among those three, one. So my question is, are you aware, have you read or seen or been told of any statement that you allegedly made to Mike Strzok that is documented where you talked about a mutual pulling of Kathy's coat?
I think I told Mike Strzok about us both yanking on the coat.
In fact, Mr. Durst, isn't it correct that in your two statements to Mike Strzok on February 5th and February 8th, not only did you not mention a pulling of the coat, you said the two of you had never argued at all? Correct?
I don't know.
In fact, a moment ago, Mr. Durst, when I asked you, you said Kathy and I didn't argue that night, and I told Mike Strzok that. Now, 5 minutes later, you say, oh no, I told Mike Strzok that we were having a battle over the coat. Which is it?
We were having a battle over the coat.
So, Mr. Durst, the question is, you said a few moments ago you never told Mike Strzok that you were having an argument because you weren't having an argument. Now you're saying, oh no, I told Mike Strzok, well, we were having an argument apparently over the coat. Would you agree those two statements are themselves inconsistent? They both cannot be true.
I think I told Mike Strzok that we had a pulling, shoving contest with the coat.
And are you aware, Mr. Durst, of ever having seen anything in a report that says that?
I have no idea what reports you've seen.
You were present when Mike Strzok testified over several days, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember Mike Strzok ever saying, or being asked about, or showing a copy of any statement that you made saying you and Kathy had a battle over the coat?
I don't remember whether Mike Strzok said that or not.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that the issue for you is not whether or not you remember what happened? In other words, the question is not, does Bob Durst remember what happened that night? The question is Bob Durst being truthful about what he's saying? Do you understand my question?
I do.
Okay, can you answer it?
I agree.
Okay. You also testified about disabling one of the battery cables on the car. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that that statement, that fact, you have never said to anybody in law enforcement, to Andrew Jarecki, prior to saying that in open court on August 11, 2021?
I think I've stated that I disabled a Mercedes to numerous people.
Who? Let me restrict it. Please restrict the people that you've told it to living individuals.
Mike Strook.
So if, I want you to assume for a moment that, again, Mike Struck, in being called as a witness by your team and being cross-examined and testifying for several days, I want you to assume that Mike Struck never testified to the detail that you said you had gone out and disabled the car by removing one of the battery cables. I want you to assume that that happened. Would you be able to explain, if that occurred, how it occurred?
I don't know what Mike Strook testified to or what he remembers. I told him in 2001.
2001 or 1982?
I'm sorry I misspoke. 1982.
Now, Mr. Durst, would you agree that whether or not you had a physical fight with your missing wife when she disappeared, that that would be an important issue in this case?
I guess so.
Would you further agree, Mr. Durst, that if in fact you had a violent argument with your wife when she disappeared, that admitting so would potentially be damaging to your case?
I cannot assume that we had a violent argument because it wasn't so violent.
I thought you didn't have any argument at all. Now we're back to, Mr. Durst, do you notice that every time I ask you a question, you kind of forget what you said before, and maybe you say we had an argument, maybe you don't. Was that a slip up right there?
No,
Okay, so let's back up a step. Did you have an argument with your wife that night?
not sure I would call it an argument.
Okay, what would you call it?
A disagreement.
Okay, tell me about this disagreement.
She wanted to drive to the city. I said, you're loaded. I'm not going to let you drive to the city. I asked her for the keys to the car. She looked at the coat. I looked at the coat. We both grabbed the coat. A bunch of stuff came out of the pockets in the coat. One of the things that came out of the pockets in the coat were the keys. I picked up the keys, went outside, and disconnected the cable.
Let me ask you something. Do you think, if I were to ask you, Mr. Durst, which story is more damaging to your case? The one that you just told, or the one you told Andrew Jarecki where you said you had a pushing, shoving argument?
Well, pushing and shoving the coat.
Listen to my question. Do you agree, Mr. Durst, that the statement that you gave to Andrew Jarecki is substantially more damaging to your case than the version you're now giving in court today?
Well, you just showed me that I gave Andrew Jarecki two different statements.
Okay, would you agree that I'll deal with the two different statements in a moment, but would you agree, Mr. Durst, that telling Andrew Jarecki when he says, was that a verbal argument, and you responding, no, that was a pushing, shoving argument, does that sound more severe and more violent than a struggle over a coat, which you've now testified to in court?
Sounds about the same.
Let me ask something. If you had a violent argument with your wife, would you admit to it right now?
I do not consider what we had to be a violent argument.
Okay, so listen to my question. If you had a violent argument with your wife, would you admit it?
I described what my wife and I did at 7:30 or whatever, Sunday night, the 31st of January. Whether it was a violent argument or a pushing, shoving argument, I will leave to others to decide. I told you what happened.
So that's not my question. So I'm going to ask the question again. Mr. Durst, you can either answer the question, or if you tell me, John, I'm not going to answer that question, I'll move on. But I got to have one or the other. Mr. Durst, if you had a violent argument with your wife, would you tell us?
That's a hypothetical that did not happen.
If you had a violent argument with your wife, Mr. Durst, would you tell us?
I did not have a violent argument with my wife.
If you had a violent argument with your wife, Mr. Durst, would you tell us?
That is a hypothetical, and I'm not going to answer a hypothetical.
Do you understand, Mr. Durst, that you don't get to choose the answers that you give? Do you understand that?
It's a little bit, his obligation is to answer truthfully. So rephrase your question.
Mr. Durst, not only do you have an obligation to answer truthfully, you would agree, you have an obligation to answer, period, correct?
Instruction on the law should come from the court.
Okay, Your Honor, can the court instruct Mr. Durst that he has the obligation to not only A, answer the question, and B, answer it truthfully?
It's correct, Mr. Durst.
Mr. DeGuerin, can you speak up a little?
I'm sorry.
So what is the question?
If you had a violent argument with your wife, Kathy, on January 31st, 1982, would you tell us?
Yes.
Mr. Durst, is there a reason why you said before, if you killed her, you wouldn't tell us, but you would admit to having a violent argument? What's the difference?
There's nothing criminal about having a violent argument.
So your viewpoint is you will admit it because you don't think that it's actually that damaging to your case. Is that correct?
Correct.
By the way, is your wife, Kathy, did she have training in breaking into vehicles, or was she a top flight mechanic? Any kind of training like that?
No.
So, if you had the keys to the car, why did you need to disconnect the cable?
Because when I got back inside the house, Kathy had just gotten out of the shower and was getting dressed and wanted me to leave her at the train station.
Okay, let's back up. So you said, Mr. Durst, that you had a struggle for the coat, correct? And let's back up. Let's go through detail by detail, minute by minute, what happened when she got home. Go ahead, you can narrate. let me just ask you, let me withdraw that question. I assume, Mr. Durst, that the last day, the last memory, the last interaction you had with your loving and missing wife, you will never, ever forget. Is that correct?
Correct.
I would assume that over the years, you must have gone through this in your mind hundreds of times, trying to figure out what possibly could have happened to my beloved missing wife, correct?
Correct.
Please take us through minute by minute with your detailed memory of exactly what happened when she got home.
I was in the living room. The dog started barking, which meant Kathy was home. I opened the front door. Kathy came indoors. The dog went outdoors. Kathy said, "I am going to drive to the city." I said, "You're not going to drive to the city." Kathy walked over, took off her coat, put it on the back of the couch, went into the kitchen and got a beer and came back. When she got back, I asked her for the keys to the car. She looked at the coat. I looked at the coat. We both grabbed the coat. Stuff came out of the pockets in the coat. One of the things that came out of the pocket were the car keys. I picked up the car keys, told Kathy I was going to go outside and disable the car. I went outside, opened up the hood, took the cable, the battery cable off one of the terminals, went back inside, and by then Kathy was getting out of the shower and getting dressed in the clothes she had worn when we drove up Friday night. She said, "I want you to take me to the train station so I can make the 9:15. I said, "Sure."
Let me just stop you. By the 9:15, you mean is that a 9:15 p.m. train?
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Might be the 9:17, the 9:15 or the 9:17, whichever it is. She got dressed. We went outside. I reattached the battery cable. I drove us to the Katona train station. We pulled up right next to the platform. In 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, the train arrived. The doors to the train opened. The half a dozen or 8 people standing on the platform walked into the train. Kathy was one of them. 30 seconds later, the door closed. The train pulled out of the station.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that the statement you've just given about your memory of Kathy is very detailed? Agreed?
That's what you asked me to do.
I'm not criticizing, I'm just asking you, was that a very detailed statement?
Yes.
Complete with remembering what the dog did, correct?
You couldn't miss the dog. Yes.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that as detailed as that statement is, that in order to believe it, somebody has to believe you, correct?
I think in order to believe it, you've got to believe it.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Repeat that, please.
In order to believe it, you have to believe it.
By it, you have to believe you, correct?
There was nobody else there.
So the answer.
Yes, correct.
And Mr. Durst, would you agree that the fact that you can tell a long, detailed story, would you agree that in this case, you've already admitted that many long, detailed stories you've told are absolute lies, correct?
I lied to Andrew Jarecki.
You lied to me, correct?
Which I don't remember lying to you. When would I have lied to you?
During our March 15, 2015 interview, you're saying you were truthful during that interview?
I don't remember what I said.
Let me just give you one. Do you remember lying and saying you didn't write the cadaver note?
Yes,
You lied during your testimony in Galveston, correct?
correct.
And some of the stories that you told to Andrew Jarecki in Galveston, to me, which were lies, were also long, detailed stories with lots of facts, lots of images, correct?
There's something wrong with your question. I never said anything to Jarecki in Galveston.
And that's not what I said. Listen to my question. You've given long, detailed statements to Andrew Jarecki in your Galveston trial, to myself and investigators. And my question is in those long, detailed statements that you've given, many of those long, detailed statements have been lies, correct?
When I was under oath in Galveston, I lied one time. That was when I said I was in Northern California, when I was actually in Southern California when Susan Berman was murdered. That was the only lie I told in the Galveston trial.
Well, Mr. Durst, but in telling that lie, you gave a whole detailed recitation of exactly what you'd done, where you'd gone, where you'd been, where you hadn't gone, correct?
We're talking about in Galveston?
In the Galveston trial, you described your trip out to California, and you gave details of what you did while you were there, and you omitted many details, correct?
I'm not sure I remember, but whatever I said, I would have had to omit many details.
And in the statements you've given to Andrew Jarecki, I played a number of them, and they're long. And what you've said is, I said those, but I made them up because Andrew Jarecki told me to, correct?
Sometimes, yes.
And many of those stories involved complicated details. Would you agree?
Would I agree that many of the stories involve complicated details? I guess.
And so, Mr. Durst, what I'm asking you is, you would agree that in the end, just because you told a now pretty long, pretty detailed story about what happened with Kathy when she got home, you would agree just because there are a bunch of details doesn't make it true, correct?
Well, there's always going to be some details. You asked me to give a detailed statement, and I gave it.
So listen, that's not my question. I'm not criticizing you for giving the detailed statement. Listen to my question. Would you agree that just because you just gave a long, detailed statement of what you say is exactly what happened from the time Kathy came home to the time you dropped her off to the train, would you agree that statement contained a lot of details?
Yes, it contained a lot of details.
Would you
I
further...
could bring a longer statement and give you more details if that's what you would like.
Are you saying you omitted details? I want you to tell me everything. Please, if there's more details, do you want to tell them or do you need some time to think about them and make them up?
Stay.
Do you need, are you ready to give them right now? Go ahead. Give me all the details. That's what I asked for. I want every detail.
So the dog starts barking. That means that Kathy's home, because we're at the end of a dead-end street. I open up the door, the dog walks out. Kathy walks in, I hold the door for her.
Well, let me stop you for a moment. Which hand did you use to open the door?
With my left hand.
Do you remember how many steps you took as you were walking to the door?
No, I don't know how many steps I took.
Okay, go ahead. Please continue. Go ahead.
I don't know how many steps I took.
Oh, no, no. Please continue the story, adding the details that...
I should continue.
Yeah.
So I use my left hand to open the door. The dog goes outside. Kathy comes inside, puts the coat across the back of the couch.
Which side of the couch did she put the coat on?
She put the coat across the back of the couch.
If I were to ask you what percentage of the coat, when she draped it over, can you tell us, like, what percent of the coat was on the front of the couch, what percent was in the middle, the back of the couch? Please relate the exact placement of the coat as you remember it. For-
You may resume.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, what was Kathy wearing the last time you saw her?
Big tan coat, blue jeans, cowboy boots, some kind of shirt.
You remember all that, but on your direct, you couldn't remember whether she was wearing her diamond earrings, correct?
I don't remember if she was wearing earrings.
So you remember which hand you used to open the door, but the image of your wife's face, which I assume would include her ears, you have no memory of whether she was wearing diamond earrings.
I don't remember if she was wearing earrings.
You would agree, though,
When I
that
think about letting the dog out, I have to do it with my left hand.
you agree, Mr. Durst, that you reported to Detective Struck during your February 5th, 1982 interview exactly what she was wearing, and you included in that description that she was wearing diamond earrings, correct?
I don't remember that, no.
Put up the missing persons report, please, Mr. Milius. while he's doing that, you would agree, Mr. Durst, that when you spoke to Detective Struck a few days after your wife allegedly disappeared, your memory, pretty good now, but it would have been even better then, correct?
And Your Honor, this is 57C.
57C, thank you.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst? Would you agree?
I haven't finished reading the question yet.
Oh, okay.
My memory would have been better then.
And you wrote, correct, she was wearing a gray tweed, diamond earrings, and then you mentioned that she was wearing 2 gold chains, correct?
Two gold chains, I remember.
Now, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that you made very clear to Andrew Jarecki during your December 13, 2010 interview that Kathy was absolutely wearing her earrings when she disappeared?
I don't remember what I told Andrew.
RD 507, 121310, page 708, line 17 to page 709, line 17.
And Your Honor, I believe this is actually a new exhibit, and so
You know, I'm going to try something, Mr. Milius, before we do that.
the number of
Before you play it. Mr. Durst,
number right here, before it's on the screen.
The report on the screen was people's... 57C.
do you recall saying during the interview, and I'm not reading the entire clip, you were talking about the reinvestigation and how divers were sent out to the lake. And you said that as it went on, week after week after week, and you're referring to Janine Pirro, would never say, we're interviewing this witness, we're interviewing that witness, we found this evidence, big stuff about divers in the lake and taking the wall out of the house. But they would never say, we found such and such, we found Kathy's body in the lake, we found her earrings. Does that refresh your memory, Mr. Durst, that you were aware that Kathy was wearing her earrings?
I don't remember her wearing earrings.
So would you...
My memory back then was probably better than my memory now.
So you would agree that having seen the missing person report where it mentions she's wearing diamond earrings that you submitted, and the fact that you referred to her wearing the earrings during your conversation with Mr. Jarecki leads you to believe that at that time you believed she was wearing her diamond earrings, correct?
Correct.
Now, you also know from Detective Struck's testimony that those earrings, her diamond earrings, were recovered by Mary Hughes and Geraldine McInerney from your Riverside Drive apartment, correct?
Correct.
And because you heard the testimony, you realized when you heard it, Mr. Durst, correct, that if Kathy's earrings were found back at the apartment, if they were found back there, that could be damaging to you, correct?
No, the fact that they found Kathy's, I'm not sure which earrings we're talking about now, but Mary Hughes and Geraldine McInerney, at my suggestion, looked over Kathy's stuff to see if they would give them any hint as to what had happened to Kathy. They found her jewelry box. In the jewelry box, there were some diamond earrings. All that tells me is that Kathy Durst got back to the Riverside Drive apartment Sunday night, January 31st, after taking the train from Katona.
Mr. Durst, is there another reasonable inference that somebody could make from the fact that those earrings were back in your apartment?
whenever Kathy would come home, the first thing she would do was take off her jewelry, which is what she must have done January 31st at about 11 when the train would get in.
Isn't there another inference, Mr. Durst, that can be made from the fact that those earrings were found back at Riverside Drive? Isn't there another inference?
The problem with this is that Kathy had more than one set of diamond earrings. In terms of what else can be inferred, maybe it can be inferred that Bob has a bad memory and didn't pay careful attention to what jewelry his wife was wearing.
How about a third possibility? How about the idea, Mr. Durst, that you killed your wife, and because you're cheap, you took those earrings and you put them back. You took them home with you.
It's compound, that's two questions.
All right, I'll break it down. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that the third inference certainly could be that you yourself put the earrings back on Riverside Drive?
Overruled.
I'm trying to figure out how exactly that would work. I guess it's possible I could have said, Kathy, give me your earrings so I can put them in your jewelry box.
I'm going to just throw one out there. How about this? How about you murder her and then off her dead body, you take her earrings and you put them back? Before, I know you're saying that didn't happen, but I want to ask you, is that a reasonable inference that could be drawn from the evidence?
Thinking,
Overruled, although maybe you could rephrase it and remove the word inference.
I'm sorry, which one?
You can remove the word inference and ask him if he did that. If
Okay,
that's what
Mr.
he did.
Mr. Durst, did you kill your wife, Kathy, and then take the earrings off of her body and put them back in Riverside Drive so you have them?
thinking about that makes my skin crawl. The answer is no, I did not kill my wife, and I did not take her earrings off of her ears.
Just want to understand, thinking about removing earrings from your wife makes your skin crawl. How about dismemberment? Does that make your skin crawl?
Absolutely.
You didn't dismember Kathy, did you?
No.
If you had dismembered her, would you tell us?
If I had dismembered it, I cannot imagine dismembering Kathy, so I cannot answer your question.
So is it different than you can imagine, well, not imagine, you dismembered Morris Black, your friend, correct?
Correct.
But that you can imagine, in fact, you did do, but the idea of dismembering Kathy, that's the line? Is that a fair assessment?
I don't think your question is proper. I did not kill Kathy, and I did not dismember her. Thinking about dismembering her makes my skin crawl.
You've said before a very similar line, right? Haven't you previously said, I did not kill my best friend, I did dismember him? You've said that one, right?
I'm wondering, that is accurate.
All right, let's talk about Bill Mayer. So you told Detective Struck on February 8th that after you dropped off Kathy at the train that you came home and you had drinks with the Mayers, correct? Is that what you said?
Not on February 8th.
No. That on February, let me back up. I'm sorry. Boy, you're absolutely right, Mr. Durst. Bad question. You told Detective Struck on February 8th that after you dropped Kathy off at the train on January 31st, you said you stopped over and had drinks with the mayors, correct?
Correct.
I gotta be, you don't miss anything. Was that true or was that a lie?
That was not true.
Also known as a lie, right?
That was a lie.
Okay. In 2010, you admitted that never happened, correct?
I think I admitted it never happened long before 2010.
Really, who did you admit it to that it had not happened prior to 2010 that is still living today?
I guess the only one who's left would be Ed Wright.
No, he died March 21st, 2021. He's not alive. Okay, well, I'll withdraw. Mr.
I'll
Durst.
strike it.
Mr. Durst, are you aware of Ed Wright's current condition?
No.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask the court, and I will give the court the documentation. I will send the court the obituary for Ed. Let me talk to the defense for a moment. Waste time on this.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll keep going. So, Mr. Durst, other than Mr. Scapetta, who was your lawyer and is long dead, and Mr. Wright, is there any other living person that you told this story prior to 2010?
I'm trying to think of when I would have talked to anybody about this kind of stuff.
Mr. Lewin, I'll agree to stipulate that he died when he was 91 years old.
Yes, on March 21st, 2021, I believe is the correct date.
Thank you.
March 11th.
Oh, March 11th, all right.
Court accepts stipulation. Thank you. That's proved, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, he's dead, so anybody alive that you said this to?
Is there a question to me?
Yes. Is there anybody alive that you told this information to prior to 2010?
I don't think I would have any occasion to discuss the details of Kathy's disappearance after 1982.
Then I believe the answer would be no, correct? There is nobody that I'm aware of that I told prior to 2010. Is that correct?
And we're ruling out my lawyers.
Yes, so let me tell you who we're ruling out. Lawyers and dead people, or dead people who are also lawyers.
So no, there would be no one else.
Okay, in 2010, December 12th, you disclosed this information to Andrew Jarecki, correct?
Which information? Her earrings?
No. RD 086, December 12th, 2010, page 445, lines 8 through 24.
And Your Honor, this was previously part of People's 269. The transcript would have been on page 63.
Thank you.
And then we went to the mayor's,
Yeah, that's what I told the police. I was hoping that would just make everything go away. I didn't go to the mayor's. I just took her to the train station, went home, and went to sleep.
And why would that have made everything go away?
Well, when I'm at the mayor's, they wanted to hear, what did you do? So I told them I did that. I just never got through my mind. It was like a negotiation. You tell somebody something, and well, that's it. They don't go back there. They don't look for motive and why is he telling me this kind of thing. I thought that would get them to, leave me alone, accept a missing person like that.
Does that refresh your memory, Mr. Durst?
It does.
So that's the first time that you admitted, other than to dead people, lawyers, or dead lawyers, that your original statement that you had talked to Kathy, that you had drinks with the mayors that night, that's the first time you admitted that was untrue. Correct?
Yes.
Mr. Durst, why would you make up such an easily provable lie?
On February 5th, when I went to the 20th precinct to report Kathy is missing, I was introduced to Detective Mike Strook, who wanted to know what made me think she was missing. I told Detective Strook how I had taken Kathy to the Katona train station. He said, "Did you see her get on the train?" And I went over my mind, did I see her get on the train? Well, her and half a dozen other people were on the platform. The train pulled in, the doors opened, everybody got on the train, the doors closed, the train pulled out of the station. He repeated again, "But did you see her get on the train?" And I had to tell him, I did not see her get on the train, but there was no place else she possibly could have gone. Then Detective Strook said, "Well, do you know she made it to Manhattan? Were there any other stops before getting to Manhattan?"
Motion to strike at this point is unresponsive. I asked a different question, Your Honor.
Yes, I know. I'm checking to see where to
See, the
stop
thing
it.
of it is responsive.
Okay, just a moment.
You
Part
just
of it.
don't like that it's not a short response.
Just a moment.
This is what happened. I
Destructive
told
Gina.
Mike Strook that there were 5
any other
stops between
before that?
Katona and Grand Central Station. Mike Strook said,
Motion to
"Well,
strike as non-responsive?
Yeah, just a moment. I'm sorry, I have another question. Why would you make up a provable lie? There was an elaborate response, and then another question, and Detective Strzok, do you know how she made it to Manhattan? Were there other stops? Did you ask that?
No. The question I asked was,
No, will you read back the question? Well, I see the question.
I asked a question about the mayors, and Mr. Durst responded with a long dissertation about train stations and stops.
You
All right.
asked me why I lied to Mike Strook."
Mr. Durst, you have to, the judge is trying to strike the last
I don't like
non-responsive.
that answer.
Okay, everybody could be quiet for a second. My transcript is not, I'm just trying to, there's no place else he could have gone. Do you know if she made it to Manhattan? Oh, I see, and Detective Strzok had asked. I see. All right. stricken.
Okay, Mr. Durst, please listen to my question carefully. Will you please try to do that?
I will listen to your question carefully.
Okay. The question I'm asking you, I want to preface it. It has nothing to do with trains, Kathy getting on the train, anything about trains. My question was, why would you tell Detective Struck that you had drinks with the mayors if it was obviously disprovable by simply having him call the mayors, as he did, and have him say, no, I didn't have drinks with Bob that night? Why would you tell such a easily provable lie, or disprovable lie, excuse me?
I'm back where I am. You're asking me why I lied to Mike Strook. And I can give you the answer, but you don't seem to like my answer.
Okay, so let me explain what I'm asking. I'm not asking you, it's a specific lie. Trust me, I'll go through all the lies. But this lie,
Yeah, the trust me, I will go through all the lies is not appropriate.
all right, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please disregard that. That's not a question, and there is no answer to that. You may, required of that.
Okay, Mr. Durst, what I'm asking you is only, why did you lie to Detective Struck, about having drinks with the mayors?
I wanted Detective Strook to take Kathy's disappearance seriously and to do what the police could do to try to find her.
Mr. Durst, you had an interesting, when you were responding to the question by Mr. Jarecki, what you mentioned, you said, let me find it here. You said, I just never got through my mind. It was like a negotiation. You tell somebody something, well, that's it. They don't go back there. They don't look for motive. What did you mean by telling him they don't look for motive? What did that mean?
I have no idea.
You agree that is your words. No one told you to say that, correct?
Correct.
So, Mr. Durst, you also said that you thought it was like a negotiation. Did you mean by that in essence, you were not used to, as Bob Durst, having anything you said questioned, correct?
I meant that it seemed like a negotiation that I was doing with Mike Strook, and that I had to convince him to take Kathy's disappearance seriously.
Well, but what you said was you tell somebody something and, well, that's it. They don't go back there. By making that statement, weren't you saying, Mr. Durst, that you were used to, in your life, you said what you wanted to say to Detective Struck, and you weren't used or didn't even think about the idea that he might actually question what you told him? Correct?
He continually questioned what I told him.
Well, Mr. Durst, as a bright person, which you've said you are bright, as a bright person, if you tell a detective, I was with so-and-so, don't you think that detective is going to call so-and-so to find out?
You're asking what I think now or what I thought then.
Let's try both. What did you think then?
I did not think about it then.
Is the reason you didn't think about it then, Mr. Durst, was because you were extremely arrogant?
I was extremely what?
Arrogant.
I didn't didn't think about it because I didn't think about it.
All right, let me move on.
Perhaps we should take our break. It's 3:15. Let's break until 3:30. Do not talk about the case. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case.